So today we're going to talk about energy use in Canada. So we've discussed a little bit about energy in terms of Ohm's law and static electricity and current electricity. And now we're going to talk about energy that's actually in your home. Okay. So let's take a moment. I want you to pause the video and I want you to think about this question. Canada is the second largest user of energy in the world. Why do you think this is the case? Pause your video and take a moment and think about that. There's lots of reasons why we might be the second largest user of energy in the entire world. It could be something like our country is very, very large in comparison to other countries. So we need energy to fuel our cars, to drive places. Although we live in the GTA and everything is relatively close together, you'll notice that if you're in other parts of Canada, you do not have the same luxury. You would not be able to necessarily jump on a public transit bus to get across to another city or even just across town. We also have really cold temperatures, so we got to consider that as well. And we have lots of energy available to us, so sometimes we don't conserve it the same way. So we live in a very northern climate, and it's cold here much of the year. With the exception of the summer months when it gets a little bit warmer and we can enjoy those nice warm 30-degree days, there is a good chunk of the year where we need to heat our homes. We have a small population that is spread over a large landmass, so we use a great deal of energy for transportation. And if we look at our population density, the number of people that are living in certain areas, you'll notice that we have high density around our lakes and around the US border, and then low density outside of that. So our population is spread out in Canada, but we do have chunks around, like I was saying, around the GTA, the Golden Horseshoe, the St. Lawrence, and also along the border of the US. So we need a great deal of energy to be able to go to other locations across Canada. So unlike other places like Denmark, for example, where they're able to use bikes as transportation for a lot of the places that they're going, that's not really an option for us. The Canadian economy uses a lot of energy. We need energy to fuel our buildings, our factories, our warehouses, our everyday lives outside of our home. So when we think about how much energy that would take up, we use quite a bit of energy because things aren't close together. We're not using warehouses for dual functions. And then the last reason why some people say that we use a lot of energy is because it's cheap and it's available to us, so why wouldn't we use it? So when there is an overabundance of something, people tend to overuse it. So we really need to think about being conscious about how much energy we're using. So let's look at how Canada actually produces energy. So there's many different ways that we can produce energy. The first is hydroelectric, and in Canada in 2015, 59.1% were made of the electricity was made by hydroelectric energy, and that's when water pushes turbines to create energy. 14.7% was nuclear, so we're taking atoms and we're using very complex chemistry and physics to actually split atoms to create energy. We have natural gas at 9.2%, so burning of natural gas to actually turn turbines. Coal was 9%, wind was 4.7%, but in PEI, it's 98.1%. And we know that PEI is surrounded by ocean, so there would be a lot of wind. And that the ability to capture the wind and turn the wind turbines would be a great way for PEI to create energy. Biomass, so burning of organic material, is 1.7%, and petroleum is 1%. But in Nunavut, it's 100%. And if we think about what Nunavut what kind of infrastructure Nunavut would have, it won't have the same ability to have hydroelectric as somewhere in southern Ontario. And then the last is solar, which is 0.5%. Okay, so what I would like you to do is take a moment and make a little chart. Okay, and you can go back to the other slides in this presentation, either in the video or the one that you downloaded for me, and I'd like you to categorize them as renewable or non-renewable. So how do we use our energy in Canada? A lot of our energy is going to transportation. 50% of our energy is going to transportation. 29% is for heating and cooling. 11% is for water, heating, and light. 2% is 11% was for water heating, 2% for lighting, and 8% is for appliances. So you can see that we use a lot of energy just to get around places. Now, energy costs are very different depending on where you live. Okay, you can see that for residential in Ontario, it is way more expensive than other places like in Quebec. And sometimes that has to do with government regulations, but it also has to do with the type of electricity that's being produced. Sometimes there are certain types that cost a lot more to set up initially, so they need to offset those costs by charging more overall. Okay, so there is this big debate: is it better to have electricity that harms the environment a little bit but you pay less, or is it better to have electricity that harms the environment less and is more sustainable but ultimately costs more in the long run? Okay. So when we look at energy renewable types, there's stuff like electric cars. There's a lot of electric brands coming out right now. We could have underwater tidal, solar, or wind are all really great examples of renewable energy sources.